Ladies and gentlemen, your thoughts create your reality. But have you ever stopped to ask yourself, who taught you how to think? Not what to think, but how to think. Most of us were taught what to memorize, what to believe, what to follow, but never how to think for ourselves. And that, my friends, is where the real transformation begins. We live in an era where information is everywhere, but wisdom is rare. We are told what success should look like, how happiness should feel, and what dreams are worth chasing. Yet in that chaos, we lose our most precious power, the ability to think correctly, clearly, and consciously. Thinking correctly isn't about being right all the time. It's about having the courage to question, the wisdom to pause, and the strength to choose your own path when the world tries to define it for you. Today, I want to take you on a journey, not to change your thoughts, but to awaken the thinker inside you, to teach you how to think in a way that empowers you, liberates you, and elevates you. Because the way you think determines the way you live. The moment you start thinking correctly, your entire world begins to change. Train your mind to question, not to complain. There is a deep difference between questioning and complaining. Complaining makes you a victim of your situation, but questioning makes you the creator of your transformation. When you complain, you give power to the problem. When you question, you give birth to a possibility. Most people spend their lives asking, why me? While the thinkers ask, what can I learn from this? The moment you start asking powerful questions, your mind shifts from helplessness to awareness, and that is the beginning of correct thinking. The truth is, your thoughts are shaped by the quality of your questions. A small change in how you frame your inner dialogue can rewrite the entire story of your life. When something goes wrong, instead of sinking into self-pity, ask, what is this situation trying to teach me? That single question changes everything. It transforms pain into purpose, loss into lesson, and weakness into wisdom. The power lies not in your circumstances, but in the questions you dare to ask yourself when no one else understands your silence. People who complain constantly are prisoners of their own emotions. They replay the same story of disappointment again and again, expecting the ending to change. But thinkers don't repeat stories, they rewrite them. They look at every struggle with curiosity instead of resentment. They train their minds to look for patterns, solutions, and insights. That is how they rise, not because life is easier for them, but because their thinking is stronger. Learning to question requires courage. It means unlearning what you were taught to believe blindly. It means standing face to face with your fears and asking them, what truth are you hiding behind your roar? It means no longer being a slave to societal definitions, but becoming the author of your own understanding. When you begin to question with intent, your thoughts become your teachers instead of your tormentors. Every great invention, every breakthrough, every movement in history began with a question. Why not? What if? How can I change this? Those who questioned the norms didn't just think differently, they thought correctly. They refused to accept mediocrity as destiny. They refused to let the world think for them. Their minds became their greatest revolution. When you learn to question your pain becomes your professor. When you question your failures, they become your fuel. And when you question your doubts, they lead you to your destiny. The ability to question transforms the chaos in your head into clarity in your heart. You begin to see meaning where others see misery, and that is a secret of right thinking. So, train your mind every single day to question, not to complain. Every time you are tempted to react emotionally, pause and ask, what can I learn from this moment? That one habit will make you unbreakable, unstoppable, and undeniably wiser. Replace negative assumptions with empowering realities. Most people don't fail because life is unfair. They fail because their assumptions are. We assume the worst before we even try. We assume people will judge. We assume dreams are impossible. We assume we are not good enough. And those assumptions silently become the architects of our limitations. The way you think determines what you believe, and what you believe determines what you attract. If you think small, you live small. If you think doubt, you breathe defeat. To think correctly is to challenge every negative assumption your mind whispers. It's to recognize that most of your fears are not facts, they're just feelings magnified by imagination. The moment you replace those assumptions with empowering truths, your reality shifts. Instead of assuming failure, assume growth. Instead of assuming rejection, assume redirection. The universe always responds to the energy of your thoughts. So think in ways that invite strength, not surrender. Our minds are wired to protect us, not to progress us. That's why the first voice you hear when chasing a dream is the voice of doubt. But correct thinking doesn't silence that voice. It questions it. It asks, what if this fear is just my comfort zone disguised as logic? When you change the assumptions you make about yourself, your entire life begins to mirror that shift. You stop seeing obstacles as barriers and start seeing them as bridges. Every time you assume negativity, you block the flow of possibility. But when you start thinking in alignment with your potential, your thoughts begin to serve you instead of sabotaging you. This transformation happens in silence, in the moments when you choose faith over fear, self-belief over self-doubt, courage over comfort. That's when you realize thinking correctly isn't about optimism. It's about empowerment. There will always be voices that tell you that you can't, but your job is to teach your mind to say, why not me? Replace the noise of negativity with the music of self-belief. Every time your mind tries to remind you of your limits, remind it of your resilience. Every time it brings up your past, show it your potential. Your thoughts are not supposed to confine you, they are meant to refine you. Thinking correctly means you no longer assume that failure defines you. You begin to see it as feedback. You no longer assume that rejection means you're not worthy. You see it as redirection toward what's truly meant for you. And you no longer assume that others' opinions are your truth. You start defining your worth through your own clarity, not their confusion. When you replace negative assumptions with empowering realities, your mind becomes a field where confidence blooms instead of fear. You start thinking with intention, walking with conviction, and living with authenticity. And that, my friends, is how you become unstoppable in a world that thrives on limitation. Learn the art of pausing before reacting. In a world that glorifies speed, pausing is an act of strength. The greatest thinkers don't rush to respond. They choose to reflect. Every time you pause before reacting, you reclaim your power. You stop being a puppet of your emotions and start becoming the master of your mind. Thinking correctly begins the moment you learn to slow down your reactions and speed up your reflection. The pause is where wisdom lives. It's the space between what happens and how you respond that determines your peace, your growth, and your destiny. When something hurts you, the instinct is to react, to prove, to defend, to fight. But when you pause, you allow your higher self to take control instead of your wounded self. You give your mind the space to see clearly instead of emotionally. That's where true intelligence begins to shine. The art of pausing is not weakness, it's maturity. It shows that you value clarity more than chaos. You no longer let your emotions drag you into storms that your silence could have prevented. In that pause, you learn to listen not just to others, but to yourself. You begin to understand your triggers, your patterns, and your power. You realize that you can't control people, but you can always control your response. Correct thinking requires you to sit in silence when your ego wants to scream. It teaches you that not everything deserves a reaction, and not everyone deserves an explanation. The more you pause, the more peace you preserve. The more you think before you speak, the more you protect your energy from unnecessary battles. The pause becomes your shield, your sanctuary, your source of strength. In that silence, your mind reorganizes chaos into clarity. What once felt unbearable begins to make sense. What once made you angry now teaches you something profound. The pause allows you to see from a higher perspective, and that shift changes everything. It's not about suppressing your emotions, it's about mastering them. You learn to respond from power, not pain. When you start practicing the art of pausing, you stop reacting out of habit and start acting out of intention. Every choice becomes a reflection of your inner strength, not your outer pressure. You begin to understand that peace is not found in avoiding conflict, but in mastering the way you think through it. To think correctly is to pause long enough to understand before you act. It is to give your heart a moment to align with your wisdom. Because once you master your pause, no chaos can control your calm, and no emotion can overrule your evolution. Turn obstacles into opportunities through perspective. Life will never stop testing you, but thinking correctly teaches you to see every test as training. Every obstacle that comes your way carries within it the seed of an opportunity, but you'll only see it if your mind is trained to look for it. The way you think about your struggles determines whether you grow from them or get crushed by them. Correct thinking doesn't deny pain, it defines it. It allows you to ask, what is this trying to prepare me for? Instead of, why is this happening to me? That shift in perspective transforms every setback into a setup for something greater. You begin to see that the universe isn't punishing you, it's positioning you. You realize that every delay has a divine purpose hidden within it. When you face an obstacle, your first instinct is often frustration. But thinkers pause and shift their lens. They see pain as a teacher, not a punishment. They understand that diamonds are created under pressure, and so are resilient minds. When you start thinking this way, you no longer run from your challenges. You learn from them. You begin to trust that everything is shaping you, not breaking you. Perspective is everything. Two people can face the same situation, but one sees a wall while the other sees a door. The difference lies in their thinking. The moment you train your mind to find meaning in the mess, your entire experience of life changes. Correct thinking helps you rise above the situation and see it for what it truly is, a temporary storm designed to strengthen your wings. It's easy to feel defeated when life gets heavy, but perspective whispers, this too shall pass. It reminds you that pain is not permanent, it's a process. Every obstacle you overcome adds a layer of wisdom to your soul. The question is not whether life will challenge you, it's whether you will choose to grow through it instead of just going through it. When you start viewing your struggles as stepping stones, even your scars begin to shine. They become proof that you thought correctly when the world expected you to fall apart. You become living evidence that perspective is more powerful than circumstance. You start to move with grace through chaos because you know that no experience is wasted when your thinking is right. To think correctly is to transform why me into try me. It is to see every ending as the beginning of something better. It is to realize that obstacles don't define your limits, they reveal your strength. And when you start seeing through this lens, you'll understand that perspective is not just a way of thinking, it's a way of surviving beautifully. Feed your mind with growth, not with garbage. Your mind is like a garden. What you plant inside, it determines what you harvest in life. If you keep feeding it negativity, comparison, and doubt, don't be surprised when your life feels empty. But if you nurture it with inspiration, gratitude, and knowledge, it will bloom into greatness. Thinking correctly begins with choosing what kind of thoughts you allow to take root. We live in an age where our attention is constantly hijacked. Every scroll, every headline, every post shapes our perception of ourselves and the world. That's why mental discipline is not a luxury, it's a necessity. You cannot think correctly if you constantly feed your mind with chaos. You must become intentional about what you consume because your input becomes your identity. When you start feeding your mind with growth, you naturally begin to evolve. You start craving peace over drama, purpose over distraction, and progress over perfection. You realize that not every voice deserves to echo in your head. Correct thinking is choosing what nourishes you instead of what numbs you. It's about replacing gossip with gratitude, complaints with curiosity, and fear with faith. Every book you read, every word you listen to, every thought you entertain either strengthens or weakens your thinking. That's why you must protect your mental diet. Feed it with stories of resilience, lessons from failures, and words that make you rise instead of retreat. Because the mind becomes what it repeatedly hears. And it grows in the direction of its most dominant thoughts. Feeding your mind with growth means surrounding yourself with energy that elevates you. Spend time with people who challenge you to think bigger, not those who drain your dreams with their doubts. Watch what you give attention to, because attention is the currency of your consciousness. You don't need more information. You need more intention about what you let in. When you think correctly, you stop craving validation from noise. You begin to find nourishment in silence, strength in solitude, and wisdom in self-reflection. You no longer let the world dictate your mindset, you curate it carefully. Because a strong mind doesn't grow by accident, it grows by awareness. Feed your mind with growth every day. Water it with positivity, fertilize it with learning, and protect it from the weeds of negativity. The more you feed it with greatness, the more greatness it will create. Because when your mind grows, everything around you grows too. In the end, thinking correctly is not just a mental skill, it is a spiritual awakening. It is the art of reclaiming control over the only thing that truly shapes your destiny, your mind. When you learn to question instead of complain, your thoughts begin to work for you, not against you. When you replace negative assumptions with empowering realities, you no longer see yourself as a victim of life's chaos. You see yourself as the creator of calm within it. When you pause before reacting, you protect your peace like a sacred gift. When you turn obstacles into opportunities, you begin to see beauty even in the broken. And when you feed your mind with growth, you become unstoppable. Because a nourished mind cannot live an average life. Every change begins with a single thought. And every revolution begins with a single realization that you are not your past, you are not your pain, and you are not your doubts. You are the thinker of your thoughts, the sculptor of your perspective, and the designer of your destiny. Once you learn to think correctly, nothing can limit what you can become. Because when the mind transforms, everything else follows: your actions, your attitude, your outcomes, your entire existence. And that, right there, is how you change your life forever, by simply learning how to think correctly.